Family greetings, welcome back to my channel. I want to explore a story that I've seen developing in which a black actress is coming under fire for her portrayal of Cleopatra in an upcoming film. Apparently, an Egyptian lawyer has filed a lawsuit against the makers of a recent film which portrayed Cleopatra as being a black woman. Okay, persons in the present day state of Egypt are very irate that a black woman would portray one of the ancient Egyptians, right? And most recently there have been numerous films portraying ancient Egyptians as Caucasian, right? And that never registered with these persons, right? But the portrayal of one of these ancient figures as being black seemed to have struck a chord with them, and it really brought back this age-old debate about the actual race of the Egyptians. Alright, we all know that Egypt is in Africa, and that Egypt and Nubia were two very closely connected kingdoms. Alright, we also know that at one point, one particular pharaoh was the quote-unquote lord of the two lands, meaning he ruled over both Egypt and Nubia. Okay, we know that in the sculptures and in the paintings of the ancient Egyptians, they portrayed themselves as being medium brown to dark black, right? Even the figures who are the gods of Egypt are portrayed as being black, right? There are various stelae and other depictions which show the various races that passed through Egypt, right? They showed persons that look like Asians, Caucasians, and black persons. And all of these depictions were giving anyone who visited an idea of the various types of persons that actually lived in Egypt, right? We know that Egypt was once a center of Christianity. We know that Egypt was once a center of higher learning in the world. Alright, all of the greatest scholars who are portrayed as being the world's formative thinkers actually studied in Egypt. Alright, Hippocrates had a teacher. Right, we all know that Imhotep was described as being the god of medicine in Egypt. Right, Imhotep performed the first brain surgery before there was ever a physician in Greece, before there was ever a physician in Rome. We know that various scholars have all been honest about it. If you read Herodotus and his account of Egypt, Herodotus was actually there. He saw the people of Egypt. He described how broad the land was. He described the floating gardens. He described the outer surface of the pyramids gleaming in the sun. And he spoke about the canals that were dug for irrigation. And he also said that the Egyptians were similar to a colony of persons called the Colchians, who he said had woolly hair and dark skin. Right? So a person who was actually there is telling you explicitly that these people are black. But modern day anthropologists have decided to use intellectual dishonesty and manipulation to actually write Africans out of their own story, right? They are using various samples from non-Africans to give the impressions that Africans were not a part of the ancient Egyptian world and that the European was actually there, right? And when you consider it, I highly doubt that persons who could not survive in a hot climate would actually have lived and thrived in Egypt or in any part of Africa, right? We know that Caucasian persons and other individuals have a hard time living in the sun, right? I doubt they would have even had any type of deity pertaining to the sun, right? We know that in the Norse traditions and the other ancient European traditions, they all worship things that were like in the cold climate, like the evergreen tree, um, so on and so forth. They worship things that were in their environment. So even on the level of like their spirituality, I highly doubt that Europeans would have had like a sun deity, and Europeans would have had a black god and a black goddess, and a black immaculate conception, you know, on the continent of Africa. I highly doubt that this would have been possible for them to arrive at this type of spiritual system, knowing that they actually originated from the Caucasus Mountains, which was a cold region, right? And so there are numerous things I can say about this topic, but Zahi Hawass and the Egyptian Antiquities and Monuments um, Department have been very dishonest with the public. They have been ravenously digging all through the continent of Africa, disturbing the burial place of the ancient Egyptians, opening their sarcophagus, unwrapping mummies. These persons have been walking around with a magnifying glass in a place that was supposed to be the final resting place of the ancient Egyptians, right? And this alone proves that these people don't have a connection to Africa, all right? If you actually revere these people as your ancestors, right, why would you disturb their burial place? Nobody that has a burial place for their ancestors would actually go and disturb it purposefully. And so all of these things give the impression that these persons had never had a connection with the ancient Egyptians, and they actually want to now portray themselves as being these people, right? The only thing that actually makes them Egyptian is their actual passport, and the fact that today they are acknowledged as the modern Egyptians. But we know that for a fact that they have no connection at all. So basically, I'm disturbed by the story. How can people try to steal a person's ancestors? This is psychopathic racism. How can you try to steal my ancestors? These are my ancestors. We have the same genetics. You can't use the mummified corpse of an invader and try to portray that as being all of the people in that region. It doesn't work that way. Okay, any person who came to Egypt and passed on, right, they would have been going through the same funerary procedures, right? And so if you find somebody in a sarcophagus and they happen to be European, did you determine if they were actually a part of the invading army that came into Egypt under Alexander's forces? We know that Ptolemy the Great, or so-called Ptolemy the First, invaded Egypt and actually ruled for a period of time. And so anyone who died under Ptolemy was mummified, right? You can't just say that, okay, Ptolemy's forces were found there, all of the persons there are now European. It's psychotic. So family, let me know your thoughts in the comments below about all these dynamics. One love.